So I wanted to record a video following up on a previous video I recorded recently. The one I recorded 2 videos ago, basically, where I mentioned that the modern left were no better than the alt-right. And it was very much from a disability perspective. And a comment I got really just goes to show the problem. I was told to go back to my white family and join the alt-right. Or we need your help because no one's going to fight for us. The hypocrisy of this member of the Black American community, and if I was to use their terminology, I would accuse them of drowning in able-bodied privilege, is sickening. I'm well aware of the racial problems in the US at the moment. But it's abundantly clear that as the American stereotype of Americans being unable to see outside of their own backyards is clearly true here, that people who are fighting racial injustice are incapable of seeing outside of their own asses. So I'm going to put this out there, and anyone who doesn't like it can eat a bag of Yahtzee dicks as far as I'm concerned. The reality is that by far the group that is the most persecuted and victims of violence and marginalized are people with a disability, and I don't care who gets pissed off at that. We're currently here in the middle of a royal commission into the abuse, neglect, and exploitation of people with a disability. The reason for that is, if you want to go through everything, those of us with a disability are targeted for child abuse before we even leave the womb. If we happen to make it outside of the womb because someone doesn't pre-screen us for disabilities and then decide that we're life unworthy of life and then aborts us, and no, there is not a uterus exception clause to the Nuremberg Declaration of Never Again, and I will touch on that later. If we survive that, we will overwhelmingly be the victims of child abuse in horrific forms, be it locked in cages, or as I personally experienced when I dislocated my foot as a minor, being told to sit there and shut up, being made to sleep on the floor and having to pop my own foot back in place. That's the reality. We will overwhelmingly be abused by our teachers and people who have a duty of care to us. As a result of that, when we grow up, we will be at least 2 to 3 times more likely to experience sexual violence and domestic violence. And when it comes to suicide, those of us with a significant disability have a 42% chance of being suicidal and an 18% chance of attempting suicide at least once. But you're not targeted by laws in the way that people of colour are. Want to bet? When you look at antisocial behaviour laws, one of the things that they do, as they did back in the Weimar Republic, where they were instituted, is that they equate mental illness and disability with criminality. Someone having a mental illness episode is deemed to be acting antisocially. Antisocial behaviour laws criminalize that, just as they did in pre-Yahtzee Germany. And I'm using the word Yahtzee so the algorithm doesn't demonetize or remove this video. You also have the matter of patriarchal dominance models that feminists push. Now, patriarchal dominance models argue that all abuse is a manifestation of the oppression of women and the product of male power, where women can only be victims, only males can be perpetrators. Pardon me. And of course, when you factor the fact that those of us with a disability have no real power, meaning we're not capable of actively oppressing anyone, you realize that we're only capable of passive oppression. In other words, our mere existence is inherently deemed to be oppressive. In other words, the only way that systems that are based on patriarchal dominance models, and that's pretty much every single law, procedure, and policy that cover abuse in the Western world, the only way that patriarchal dominance models and the laws, procedures, and policies which are based on them are capable of responding to female on male abuse against people with a disability is by blaming the victim and essentially arguing that the victim's mere existence oppressed their abusers into abusing them. Now, racial profiling is certainly egregious, but I don't recall it extending to child abuse, pedophilia, rape, and domestic violence. I don't recall people turning around to a black man in the US and who's been raped and saying, you need to attend a sex offender program because of your blackness. I don't recall them turning around and saying that you need to attend anger management and a perpetrator program to a black man who's had the crap kicked out of him by his abusive wife based on his blackness, or an Hispanic man based on him being Hispanic. Yet that is exactly how the system responds to disabled male survivors of abuse. That is why we have a Royal Commission here at the moment, which for the Americans listening is the equivalent of either a grand jury or a presidential commission. There's no straight equivalency. Those are the two closest examples to it in America's legal jurisdiction, in the American legal system. But that gives you an idea of where we're at with this problem. And part of it is because we have situations where kids with disability, kids on the spectrum, are locked in cages and treated like animals by their teachers. I'll also add that between 2010 and 2013, the Western Australian Mental Health Advisory Board had a bill, which for those who aren't aware is a draft law, up for public consultation. It called for a raft of measures against people with a mental illness as young as 12 to 14. They included electroshock therapy, psychosurgery measures that were banned and still are banned in New South Wales and the Northern Territory, indefinite detention without parental knowledge or consent. Actually, all these measures were without parental knowledge or consent, but the big kicker was children with mental illness from the age of 14 could be sterilized if they said they wanted it. Last I checked, the age of consent in this country was 16 or 17. So apparently, someone with a mental illness who's 14 who can't consent to sex can consent to being sterilized. Do the math. That is ableism in this country, and probably in other countries too. That's what you're dealing with. That is the reality of it. And I've got news for you morons on the left. You hypocritical, pedophile enabling, child abuse enabling, domestic violence enabling, rape enabling, card carrying Yahtzees on the left. Those of us with a disability are not magically protected from disability-based hate crimes because we happen to be cishet, white, or male. We are not oppressing our abusers into abusing us by way of our mere existence. And the fact that you scum claim we are proves that you are everything you want to punch. It proves that the next time you want to punch a Yahtzee, start by looking in the frickin' mirror. Because you will find one staring you in the face. And don't tell me that that isn't exactly where you stand. When patriarchal dominance models are brought up, including on the ableism they perpetuate, the standard response is woman hater. Oh, you're an abuser, blah, 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 blah. When the cultural Marxists decide they want to get involved, it's being howled down with things like, you're a white guy, you're a white guy. being threatened with violence, being told disabled white males cannot be oppressed because disabled white males benefit from misogyny and whiteness in ways that disabled women of color do not. I'd love to see these people turn around and say that able-bodied people of color cannot be oppressed because able-bodied people of color benefit from able-bodied privilege and ableism in ways that disabled white people don't. I guarantee you, if someone said that, they would be cancelled on the spot and there would be marching on the streets, and rightly so. Or I love this one from the Disability Royal Commission Advocacy Group on Facebook, which, by the way, was supported by a woman in there who is supposedly supporting this Royal Commission because of her son, who allegedly has autism, who, by the way, is clearly white, and judging from this woman's name and appearance, I'm guessing is either white or partly white, supported a notion of, I get you're angry if you have a disability, but if you're a white male, you'll never be as far behind as a female. So yes, that is exactly what you scum on the left support. You scum on the left with your moral superiority complex and your siloing labels. If you weren't such a pack of sociopaths, you might get that the only label that matters at the end of the day is human being. You are not breeding empathy. You are breeding sociopathic tendencies, and you are giving space to the very alt-rights who you claim to hate. Because in case you didn't get the memo, people with a disability are not your shield. We are not your Crips. We are not collateral damage. And we are human beings. And I don't give a rat's razoo what your intersectional matrix says the experiences of people with a disability who happen to be cishet, white, and male should be. Because they are wrong. Ableism is every bit the problem that sexism and racism are. In fact, I seem to recall around the time Graham Innes was removed from the Disability Discrimination Commissioner position back in 2014, I think it was. Funny how disability discrimination gets pulled, but race and sex doesn't. But I digress. It was revealed around that time that cases of disability discrimination were so immense that they numbered roughly the total of race and sex discrimination cases combined. So you damn Yanks in BLM who keep pushing this white male privilege BS, for someone so quick to talk about checking privilege, check your able-bodied privilege. You want people to get on their knees for pushing racism? Well, you get on your knees. Get on your knees and pray for forgiveness for being the reason that people with a disability are locked in cages. Now, personally, I don't believe that helps anyone. I don't believe that kind of guilt helps anyone. I don't believe it builds empathy. But if these scum want to push it for everyone else, then if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Stop pretending, BLM and cultural Marxists, that what you are doing is anything other than hypocritical when it comes to things like disability discrimination. And stop freaking pretending that the world outside of the USA does not exist. And if you can't do that, then pick up a frickin' globe and take a look at it and educate yourselves. Because you are the very problem that you claim everyone else is. Now, I personally want racism to end. I want all bigotry to end. Because I believe that the only label that matters is human being. But that doesn't happen when you take someone's labels in a sexist, racist, ableist, homophobic, etc. manner and decide what their experience should be and which minorities to throw under a bus because they're convenient to a narrative and which not to. That's not how it works. That's not how you get empathy. That's not how you get equality. And you are so on the wrong side of this. And I don't give a damn who gets offended by this. Because in case you scum didn't get the message, disabled lives matter even when we're cishet, white, and male. Gasp, shock, horror. For everyone who I'm preaching to the choir with on this, apologies for the rant. For everyone who I wasn't, eat a bag of phalluses and wake up to yourself. I'll forego the usual catchphrase because it would be a bit hypocritical here. But I will say to everyone, stop looking at people as labels. Start looking at them as human beings and develop empathy for them based on who they are and where they're at, not where you think they should be at based on their labels. Talk to you next time.